thought I would do a little follow-up and finish up on the computing side of the ham radio station I'm constructing. So I think you remembered that I had built up a buck converter for DC power, and I was talking about how I was going to do that. And I've since moved on to a different methodology we'll talk about. But don't forget about these little buck converters. They're pretty handy for certain things. So with the computing infrastructure, the first thing we're going to use is the Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi is all set in the Argon 1 case. I'm using the G90 is the current radio I'll be setting up with. So here is their USB interface, and I have started the construction and getting ready to test the audio interface using the Sabrient USB connector, and I've started building up the audio interface here, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But what I thought I'd show you today is how I'm powering the Raspberry Pi and how I'm actually going to operate the Raspberry Pi in one method in the field. So, Raspberry Pi computer, and we'll bring in the power box from PowerWorks. And the advantage of this is that it gets really straightforward to power the Raspberry Pi with this device. So it has high power USB socket for power, and use a cable for that. So we now have power set up. This is not turned on. We have power set up for that, and we're going to need power for another device here. I have decided that I'm going to use the Raspberry Pi with a display and a keyboard for normal operation. So I ordered a nice display from Amazon, this Lapao company's display, and it is powered by USB-C. And in addition, it is HDMI. So I have an HDMI cable with an adapter because the Raspberry Pi is a micro HDMI. So I haven't found a cable yet that's exactly right. So I've got that adapter. So the display has a mini HDMI. So that goes in the display. And the micro HDMI goes into the Raspberry Pi. And if you notice on the Raspberry Pi here, I have a Logitech wireless mouse and keyboard adapter. And then I am using this K400R keyboard from Logitech for the Raspberry Pi. And so here we are, all set up. So it's sort of like a fancy laptop, but a little bit more flexible than a laptop and maybe a little bit lighter. So turn on the power. The battery pack, 13.6 volts. Wake up the Raspberry Pi. It's coming up, and the Pi's coming. So I have a 1080p 15.6-inch display on the system with a full keyboard and trackpad. Makes for a really nice long-term sit-down digital mode station. Now, this scales. So what I can do is I can remove all this, remote access the Raspberry Pi with VNC, and then we're all set up again. So now the Raspberry Pi is fully booted up. Conky's running. I didn't plug the GPS in. I'm in the basement. GPS won't do us much good down here. So all up and running. Build-A-Pi script is run and has all of the software installed. This is all ready to go. So this is sort of long-term operation, many hours in the field, whatever, lots of battery power, running a couple of radios. I can scale this back. I can take an iPad mini. I can VNC into the Raspberry Pi, and then I don't need the keyboard and mouse and the big display, or I can scale to this. So this lets me move up and down for the price of a wireless keyboard and about $180 US for this display. So I thought you folks would enjoy taking a quick look at that. And so the final step will be to set up the USB interface for audio for the radio, digital modes, then take this whole system, pack it up as I'm going to carry it, take it out the field, unpack it as a test, set up and run, and see how things perform. I have a lot of confidence that it'll work well, but that's the acid test before we actually go into radio in the real world. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.